Hi, I'm Greg Cope White. I'm a writer and author. I'm a television writer mostly, but I wrote a book, The Pink Marine, which is now developed into a Netflix series. I write that as well. So I guess I'm a writer. Former Marine, live in California, raised all over, as you'll know from the book and the show, and just happy to be here. Literally at my age, I'm happy to wake up.
Welcome to Scratch, Claw, Push, a podcast about artists clawing out a place for themselves in the world. I'm Billy Jo Cones.
And I'm Brendan Duke. Let's go.
Thank you so much for being here. I just learned about you very, very recently, so I'm thrilled that you're here and willing to come on so quickly. It was your post about your timeline that really got me, because I think so many people think, well, I haven't gotten started by this age. Well, why even bother? So did you ever have those feelings, or how did you get past them if you did?
I still have those feelings, but yes, I took a long time. The reason that timeline is kind of shocking is because I not only did I have a late start, but I've had a long career. And I think people might not understand that there's a lot of fear and anxiety and apprehension that goes in when you're a writer, because you're giving your work out and asking it to be judged. And when you write a memoir, you're asking for your personal life to be judged and evaluated and looked at. And so I'm an older writer because I didn't start till after I got out of the military. And so I focused on the military, then got out and moved to New York, and then eventually moved to California. And it just took a while. You guys are both in show business. It's a longer ramp up than people realize. And so the way that I got over it was just pushing through. I have a fantastic partner, and he was not excited to hear me say I wanted to write a book. He was more interested in me saying either I'm writing a book or I've written a book. So I quickly shifted from I want to write a book to I'm writing a book. And then I learned not even to say I'm writing a book, because people are wondering how long you've been writing it when it's finished. I just kept that to myself. It's much better just to say I've written this, I've written that. But the old saying where the duck looks very smooth on top of the lake, but underneath his little feet are paddling. That's how it is. I think a lot of our time spent writing is spent thinking, and that thinking can lead us to talking ourselves out of not only writing what we're thinking that day, because we're constantly worrying if it's good enough, it's interesting, is anybody going to find it interesting, to all the way through to just saying, I'm just not going to write today. And then when you do have something finished, if you do make it through, it's hard to show it to somebody. It's easy if you think you're on the right track and you show it to somebody and you share it and they're excited about it and they give you a compliment. That's great, but we don't learn anything from praise. So I'm more interested in having people read it and say, "Oh, this is shit. What are you thinking about?" That actually did happen with my book. I wrote out the first 30, 40 pages and gave it to my boyfriend to read. He's not in the entertainment business. He's not a writer, but he's very smart and has good judgment, and he knows my story. So he read the pages, and his first response was, "What are you doing? You've dramatized this and fictionalized when the real story is so funny and so heartwarming." I served in the Marine Corps illegally. I had to sneak in. Not only was I gay, and that was illegal back then, this is before Don't Ask, Don't Tell, but I also failed the physical. So I had to lie and then cheat to get in. And it's a hilarious story about how I cheated them. But yeah, my entire military service was right on the edge of I was ready to get kicked out every single day. So anyway, he read those pages and he said, "What have you done? They're a dramatization, the real story." So I looked at it, and he's right. Up to then, I'd only written screenplays. I'd only written television shows and movies where you do create everything. So it took me a while to recognize that the true story and the actual story was enough. We're always wondering, is our writing enough? Is our story enough? You give an audition and you ask for feedback. Did I give enough? Did I give what they wanted? you guys have both been on auditions, I'm sure, where the feedback was they didn't go big enough, or you've had the casting director in the room say, do it again, but go bigger. And then you go big and they're like, whoa, okay, let's pull that back in. So we're constantly self-critiquing before we even put our work out there. If you have an audition, you're gonna practice it in the mirror or in front of friends or with an acting coach 50 times before you go in and put yourself on tape or walk into that room. And you've tried to work out all of those self-doubts, but they're still gonna be there. You're walking in to that room, and anybody that's sharing anything they've written is doing that too, saying, judge me at my most honest and vulnerable. And
So
it's hard because you've got that.
Yeah. And so how do you go from being in the military? Because I kind of read a little bit about your story and how you got into the military, but how did you go from being in the military to becoming a writer? Like, what was in between there?
The week after I got out of the military, I moved to New York City, and I wanted to go to grad school and study acting and writing. I didn't go to grad school. I just went to private schools. I studied with Warren Robertson and then Kate McGregor Stewart. And I really focused on learning the craft, and that's all I could do. I didn't know what working in the business looked like. That's part of the problem. You have to get the lay of the land, just like we learned in the Marine Corps. You recon a situation and you assess what needs to be done, and then you attack it. So once I worked a little bit in New York in front of the camera, then started getting scripts and reading scripts and understanding what the format looked like and what that was like. When I moved to California, I was ready to try to learn that medium. And again, I didn't even go to college, so I don't have any English classes under my belt or anything. So I had to kind of study. A writer strike hit as soon as I got to town, and there were no jobs, but I had a stack of scripts, and I used that strike time to analyze the scripts and learn that format. And then I started getting it in front of anybody that would look at it. That's when I thought if I wrote one page, everybody in the world should see it. And then I didn't realize that everybody in the world is going to have notes. So then I became a little slower, and I had a producer tell me they should have to rip the script out of my dead hands, that I'm not ready to show it to anybody. But again, you don't learn anything from praise, so you have to get it out there. So I really just buckled down, and I spent about 3 years honing and learning the craft, writing spec scripts, trying to get it into anybody that I could get into. And again, I didn't understand what the business looked like. We don't get, as creatives, we don't get 100% of our time to be creative. You guys would much rather right now be on a stage, delivering lines, take after take, going home at the end of the day. But you have a podcast, which is going to elevate your own visibility, and you're going to participate in conversations that may lead somewhere else. But the truth is, we have to reserve half of our time and our energy for the creative side, and half of our energy for the business side.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was gonna ask and follow up, because regarding what you said before about not learning anything from praise, but more from critique. So kind of a two-parter. One, is that something you got from the military? And two, for people who feel like when they get critique, they just immediately shut down, because I know that I've, in certain circumstances, have been like that before, and I've heard other people say like, yeah, I don't want to do the marketing because this person came back to me with this negative reply. And I'm like, well, what was the negative reply? And I'm like, well, that doesn't sound that bad, but it doesn't matter. Like, their emotional state is like, oh, that's awful. I can't do it now. So where did that come from? And what would you say to them about that?
The discipline comes from the military for sure. The things that I gained from the military, look, I got a lot more from them than they got from me. But the things that I learned, I'll never need an alarm clock after you've had drill instructors wake you up. But I can get up and do anything at any time. Like if you told me right now I had to get up and go, climb that wall, I would say, okay, we're climbing that wall now. So I'm an energetic and a motivated person. However, what I said earlier about the judgment and the fear still can fight that and try to tamp your creativity down because you're worried. So I think the answer to your second question is, Taking notes is an art. I think what we all have to remember is that if someone's giving you feedback, if someone's giving you notes, you've asked for that. That's one of the things we used to say in the Marine Corps when things were awful and we're marching in mud and it's raining and we're hungry and we're tired and there's no end in sight. We had a little song that included the line, "This is what you asked for. You signed up for exactly this and said, please let me do that." So if you've asked someone to read a script or review your audition before you send it in, you need to put yourself psychologically in a place for those notes. Now, listen to them. They're going to be hard. Again, it's personal. If they're giving you notes on your writing and they're like, I don't really understand this first act, this character isn't clear, the humor isn't coming through, or what even does your character want? Some of the basic things that you think you're going to answer and you haven't answered, well, your spine's going to bristle and you're going to immediately want to lash back out. I get it, but you have to just step back and look at it and take those notes objectively. First, take the notes with gratitude because that person took time out of their day to read your script and note your script, and your script may be a piece of shit and they're still willing to sit down. I'm sorry if we can't cuss.
No, you can let fly.
To give you to give you some feedback. We owe that person our grace and dignity in taking their notes. Notes should go to a conversation. If someone gives you a note, whether it's somebody from the studio or your writing coach or your mom, whoever gives you those notes, sometimes it's okay to ask for the note behind the note. Help me understand that note. Those are better responses. And if that's what it takes to get you in that frame of mind to be more receptive, go ahead and ask those questions and sort through it. If you're having feelings, keep your feelings, but let them know that you do want to understand their note. You don't have to take the note. Part of the art of taking notes is not only being gracious to the note giver, it's also being responsible to your own story and honoring your own skills as a writer to decide what note you don't want to take. I don't take every note. I don't take every note, but I make sure that every note is heard.
That's a great point. Like the idea of curiosity instead of defensiveness, which is something I learned in the restaurant industry, right?
How does that work in the restaurant industry?
That, you're going to have those nights where you're in the weeds and everybody needs something and things are going to go wrong. And if you make a mistake, or even if it's not your mistake, but like some servers would just blame the kitchen, whether it was their mistake or not their mistake. But you don't throw the kitchen under the bus, even if it is their mistake. It's like and you say you're asking
You're
for
who they
it.
see.
I am on the front lines. It's my responsibility to be the in-between. So if something goes wrong, it's still because I didn't communicate something somewhere. So it's my responsibility to fix it and to be curious about how I can fix it and to also, apologize or to just make things better in some way. So yeah, I mean, that's something that I think works in both of those worlds.
I agree. And that customer needs to feel listened to, even if you don't have a resolution that's going to solve it. Like if the fish is awful and there's no solution to the fish and you got to bring them, a free drink or whatever it is, they need to feel listened to and they don't want to, you don't want to leave them. Look, I was a waiter in New York, and my aunt, before I left in Texas, told me to bend over backwards to make sure that they gave me their last dollar. And it's true. And I was a horrible waiter. I didn't know how to operate the cappuccino machine. And so if someone would order cappuccino, I just say, the machine's broken. This is what you don't do. And then of course, that meant 2 minutes later, somebody's going to walk by with a cappuccino and I've got to eat crow and say, oh, I guess it got fixed. When it would have been much better if I just, like you said, told my table, I don't know how to make cappuccino. I'm going to get it done, but just know it's going to take a little longer because I'm going to pay some shlomo back in the back $1 to make it for me.
Right. Yeah. That owning up to what we don't know is sometimes, we had, I can't remember, somebody I was talking to was just like, I'm so nervous right now and I don't know why I'm nervous. And I'm like, my acting teacher said to do that in auditions sometimes. Like he was like, if you walk into a room and you're actively nervous, like drawing attention to it and saying, hey, I don't know what's going on, I'm kind of nervous right now, makes you charming in some way or somehow dissipates that in a way that allows you both to exist in the space.
It totally does. And the thing that we all have to remember in those auditions or in these meetings, you have to acknowledge that you're invited. And this is an appointment that someone gave you. They want to see you. They want to see you audition. They want to meet you about the script you just wrote, whatever that is. Walk into those rooms, whether it's a pitch meeting or an audition or feedback, knowing that you're invited. And that should help ease some of the anxiety. And then I love, what you said. Of course, you answer, help me understand the note. I'm nervous, whatever that is. I don't understand that. They understand their note. So if they can help you get there, that it can become a conversation. You don't need to shut down. Again, the time is to be honored. It's not just your time, it's their time. They're reading this for free. They're watching your audition tape for free. They're reading your short story, and they may not get it. And that's fine. It may be something that you've got to work on in order to make your voice and your point of view more clear. Like I said, those early pages that I wrote when I drafted my book, I've never seen those pages again, because I realized after his note, why did you dramatize so many things? When I reread it, I thought, I've only written screenplays. That's what I'm used to. So I've never opened that file again. I don't even know if I still have it. I started from scratch and just told the story the way that I knew it should be told.
So I'm curious, at what point in your journey, as you get out of the military up till now, at what point did you decide to write that memoir?
I knew I wanted to write about that experience. I've never met a Marine that didn't want to write about their experience. Our branch is so unique and so special that that's why most movies and TV shows pick the Marine Corps, less pick the Navy to highlight, or has there been a show about the Coast Guard? But
there's been one movie that I can think of. I think there's one with Kevin Costner and what's the guy, Ashton Kutcher. That's literally the only one I can think of.
Okay, well,
I can remember it because it's only been one.
But they got one. So when I was in boot camp, and this is in the book, I remember, I was on guard duty one night, and I was walking. It was very quiet, probably 4 o'clock in the morning, and the big Klieg lights from outside, the security lights are shining into the squad bay, and all my fellow recruits were asleep. The rifles are hanging. It was just such a scene and such an imprint on my psyche that I said then, when I was 18, I'm going to write about this one day. I didn't know what writing looked like. I've had some college, by the way. When I said I'm in college, I don't have a degree. When I got to college, I started figuring out, how people told stories. My grandfather was very influential as a storyteller. I knew how to, I knew about pace from him and structure, just listening to the way that he told stories. So I always had that in my mind. But I just always knew that I wanted to tell the story. I just didn't know what writing looked like for me personally. Again, that's probably why I waited so long, because I just didn't know how to make that look like writing. That's awfully stated.
So when you went from, I'm going to skip back just a little bit here, but when you went from military and then to acting and then to writing, what was your first big project that you completed that was your own?
Oh, probably, it took a while, because one of the reasons I wanted to write instead of act was because I realized how little control I had as an actor. I wasn't responsible for those words. I wasn't responsible for what I did, really. Somebody else was going to shape me into what they wanted. And so I thought it'd be nice to create all that stuff. So I think the first thing that really felt like mine was when I first started writing spec scripts. And again, really clumsy. That's when back in the old days, you used to pick a show that was on the air, like a very popular show, an A-level show. I don't know if your listeners remember this show, but there was a show with Bob Newhart called Newhart. And I spec'd that show because it had a really funny ensemble. I spec'd the Golden Girls, and then I spec'd the Simpsons. And my Simpsons started getting some attention. That people responded to that well, and they loved that a lot. And then I used that Simpsons as my first shopping around spec script, and it was getting me a lot of attention, and that helped. I got really lucky and got a job working for Norman Lear when about my third year in LA. And Norman is the producer that created All in the Family and The Jeffersons and Good Times, and his movies are legendary. From This is Spinal Tap. They're doing a sequel to Spinal Tap right now, by the way. They're filming that. And Fried Green Tomatoes and Princess Bride and Stand By Me and all that. So I loved, he was a legend. He is a legend. And that's just, it was a stroke of luck that I got in that company. And I was told to pay my dues as a writer and not show him anything for a year and just buckle down. And I was fine with that. I do that for 10 years. It's like an internship. You're in this, privileged space, seeing the best of television being created. That's what I wanted in my life. So I agreed to buckle down, however long I needed to pay my dues. And the next day, Norman walked up to introduce himself. And he said, "I hear you're a writer." And I thought, oh, how do I answer that? And he said, "Have something on my desk tomorrow." So it was that Simpson script. I stayed up all night polishing, getting it ready to go. And that got me a lot of attention. He ended up putting me on 2 of his shows. And then we developed a ton of stuff together. And I wasn't ready to write my book. A lot of people encouraged me to write my story as a screenplay. But I'd written screenplays, I'd written TV shows. By the time I got around to actually buckling down and starting the book, I would have rather written something new, like a book. And then Norman stayed in my life. He wrote the foreword to the book. I'm very proud of that. And then he is the executive producer of the show that's adapted from the book.
So just forgive my ignorance, because I am not in the TV world. I came from Minnesota. There wasn't a lot going on there. But when the spec scripts, is that, so you said that's how you used to sort of get into the writers' rooms back then? Is that right? Did you get a literary agent from the spec script, or did it just get into the room? Like, how did that?
No, I got a literary agent. I had a lot of doors opened once I was working for Norman and meeting really great people, agents, managers, and lawyers and things like that. And that's not how I got my agent, but I got a lower ranking agent. I submitted to everybody. I was thrilled to get some response. And then once I got my first script, my first writing assignment was for an HBO show called Dream On. I switched to a better agent. So it was a process. And when I said in the old days, you spec something that was on the air, nowadays, writers are expected and free to create a show as their spec. So you're using an original sample of an original concept that you've created as your spec.
Okay. I remember that show, Dream On. I used to watch it. It
was a really fun show to write for.
So it's still the same process, only now it's people are doing original stuff.
Yeah, you do. And you're welcome to spec an existing show if you have a great take on something. It's just, back in the day, a showrunner for Golden Girls would read your Roseanne script or your Fraser and say, "Oh, his humor is in line with ours. I like his voice. I think he could do ours." Because once you're on a show, you're not writing in your voice, you're writing on the show's voice. Right. Whatever the showrunner has created, whatever they've done, you're following that. So if there's a character that speaks really snarkily all the time, or there's a character that's really stupid, or a character that's a brainiac, you're writing what that is for them. You're walking into an established thing.
And when you moved to LA from New York, were you still trying to act at that point, or did you know I'm going there to be a writer?
I was acting if the work came along, but I was more interested in being a writer at that point because I'd acted some in New York. I did soap operas in New York and commercials. And that's when I figured out that I was probably going to be more of use on the other side of the camera, writing this stuff or creating it.
Okay. I'm just curious.
Did you find that studying the acting helped with the writing?
Absolutely. I tell, there's a terrific program out there. If any of your listeners have been in the military, the Writers Guild has a year-long mentorship for military veterans wanting to transition into screenwriting. And that's tonight we practice our pitches. It's a year-long program, and at the end it culminates with a pitch session for our mentees get to pitch to industry professionals, and maybe they want to meet them, maybe they want to read their script, maybe they want to buy their script, whatever. And but it's the membership application period is closed for this year, but it's every year. It's been going on forever. It's a terrific program. You work with all working writers as your mentors. But that was a tee up to your question. Can you say your question again?
Shoot. I was just thinking one of our past guests actually took part in that. A guy from the Air Force, Gabriel Malasik.
I know Gabe.
Do you?
Yes.
Yeah,
He's a terrific guy.
It's a small world. So through Brandon, I moved to Georgia, met Heidi Rue. Heidi Rue introduced me to Brandon. Brandon introduced me to a writer who has a podcast, a fiction podcast back in Minnesota, which is where I'm from. And I started working on that podcast, and his daughter is married to Gabriel.
Oh, very nice. Very nice.
So, yeah.
So we do the 6 degrees there. I mean, like just shy of Kevin Bacon.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, yeah. And so I always recommend, I have to look something up about Gabriel. I always recommend.
Because I was asking earlier about like, did the acting
taking improv classes, I think that and acting classes, it's gonna help. You know, you are in, you're always pitching. And so you have to know pacing and timing. You have to know how to sell your joke. If you don't sell what you want to tell, it's just going to go away. So, you know, knowing when to ramp up the pace, like I was talking about the things that I learned from my grandfather, learning to ramp up the pace or read the room, or, you know, when to be quiet, when to slow it down, when to, you know, let your voice and your energy drive the emotion of your pitch, because you want to captivate them and entertain them, and you want them to want more. And you're not just pitching an original idea or something that you want to write. You're also, if you get a job in a writer's room on a television show, you're just pitching all day long. You just sit there and pitch. Everyone in the room pitches nonstop. Always be pitching. So the acting and the improv and all that helps so much. And I think I'm trying to, gosh.
Did you find that like also like learning more about acting helps you look at the scripts differently?
It does, you know, and it definitely helps you. It definitely helps you understand emotion, like what your character's saying. Maybe there's a way to talk about it very emotionally and a way to deliver a line. And absolutely, you're gonna if I pitch a joke in a room and I don't pitch it well, it might go away. And then the same thing, if an actor doesn't, I can't give you guys line readings on set, but I'm praying at a table reading that you're going to deliver it with the intonation that I wrote it. So yeah, it helps in every way. There's a lot of cross-pollination. You know, if you want to be a producer, you need to get on set and see what happens.
So my acting teacher, the thing that I kind of learned through the 10 years I was in his class, because I was in a professional acting class for 10 years, and the difference between bad writing and bad acting and good writing and good acting is bad writing, everything's on the surface. There's no subtext. And bad acting will take something that has a lot of subtext and you're only saying the lines and there is no subtext. So it's always about like, here's what we're saying, but here's what's actually going on beneath it. And so, yeah, I could see how being good at any of those things, my improv teacher used to say, it's not about what it's about. The scene might be about this thing, but it's really about how their marriage is falling apart. Right?
Yeah,
so it's not about the fight about the kitchen, you know, whatever it is.
It's not. And if you think about, everybody has an agenda when they come into a room, into a scene. You know, if you're writing a scene, every scene has conflict in it because everybody gets coming in from a different direction. If I have one character coming in a scene because she wants a divorce, the husband didn't know that's what she was coming in the room to do. He came in the room wanting a chicken sandwich. So now he has to switch, and that's where the fascination comes, because how does she stay on her path and he stay on his path? Well, they're going to collide, and you're going to have conflict because he's just really wanting that chicken sandwich, not a divorce. And there you have a scene.
So
Just remember that everybody walks in with their own agenda and write like that.
Some of the
Yeah.
best scenes I've seen, like in movies and TV, is where the characters are having a conversation about one thing, but everyone knows it's about something else, and then you watch them kind of extend that metaphor out. I always remember there's this one of my favorite scenes in one of my the show I love called Justified. It's these two guys that they're kind of like squaring off and kind of hunting one another. And the other guy's like, yeah, I got this idea for a movie. It's about this army guy and he's taking on this ranger. And it's the two are kind of like telegraphing what they're going to do to each other. The other guy's like, no, that's bullshit. Nobody would believe that. And he's basically like, yeah, try it, buddy. And watching that, it's a great scene. I've seen other ones too that where the subtext is, it's just barely subtext. But like two really good actors that can play that, it's just gold.
And you as an audience member are more fulfilled because you're like, oh, I figured out what they're talking about. That's just good writing. Graham Yost, that created that show, that created Justified, is a master at that. And you used a phrase that he used to use that cracked me up. We were working on a show together, and after we would finish, whether we were finished the writer's room or taping, whatever, a lot of the writers would hang out, get together, go to a restaurant. Just we weren't ready to wind down yet. And he'd always turn us down. We'd say, come on, Graham, we're going to go, down the street, whatever. And he's like, no, I got to go home. I'm trying to get this movie done and trying to get this screenplay done. And when you're writing television, you're like, yeah, good luck writing a movie. You're a TV writer. And finally, after like 2 months of him turning us down, I said, Graham, what is it that's causing you to be so devoted to writing the story? What is it? He goes, it's this idea that I had. I've almost got it down. It's basically, if it's about a bus that if it goes under 50 miles an hour, it blows up and it's full of people. And I was like, oh, okay, good luck with that, because you're writing on a sitcom. I don't see how that's ever going to work out for you. And of course, Graham's a legend and a great guy. And he did Justified.
Say pop quiz, buddy.
I saw that movie for the first time on a bus.
Oh, wow.
They played the movie on a bus?
What was that?
They played the movie on a bus?
I was on a school trip and we watched it. Yes.
That's fun.
Yeah. So oftentimes I find, with people with these big projects too, like you go from not being confident that you can do something, and like every little thing, every little step makes you more confident. But like the confidence that you get when someone else picks you is a different type of confidence than what you get from creating something of your own, which I think is the truly empowering one. So for you, it seems like from what I read before, that your life before you were 18 was very different. The military gave you some level of confidence, obviously. So I guess, how would you describe that journey from where you were as a kid to the type of confidence you had coming out of the military and the type of confidence you developed later from the projects you did yourself?
That is what my entire book is about. And it's exactly what we're examining in the show as well. The things that you mentioned are so true. I was raised incredibly chaotically. I went to 13 schools in 11 years. I went to 3 schools in 10th grade alone. And then I graduated early. I graduated as a junior just to get the hell out of that environment, away from home. But my upbringing instilled no confidence, not only in the situation I was raised in, but also society in general. I knew that I was gay early on. I was like 8, 10. I knew something was up. But because society back then was telling me that everything about that was wrong, I didn't think I stood a chance to do anything. There's nothing in this life for me. So I didn't really grab on to anything. Then I got in the Marine Corps, and just like you said, even though I wasn't supposed to be there, it was the absolute worst place for me to be, absolutely wrong. It turned out to be the best thing ever. And for the first time in my life, I was succeeding. I was doing things, stupid little things like, running through mud or whatever, but I was kicking ass, and I was doing it not only toe to toe with my fellow Marine recruits, I was also exceeding the expectations. And that was the first time I ever experienced the phenomenal feeling of exceeding expectations. I wasn't just passing, I wasn't just showing up. Every day in the Marine Corps is an incredible challenge. It's hard to wake up, it's hard to go to bed, it's awful. And they do it that way because we're training for the most awful thing in the world, which is killing and defending our country, which I'll still do today. But the things that I started getting, I started getting muscles, I started getting confidence. I learned how to fire a rifle, whatever that is. That was the first time I'd ever gotten those any acknowledgement from skills that I was gaining. Everybody has a first day at everything, but sometimes because I had changed schools so many times, I always felt like everybody had a leg up. They'd been in the situation longer. I had to learn to catch up. Same thing with the military. I went in knowing nothing about the military. I accidentally enlisted. I just heard summer camp, and I thought, I like camp. But it was that naive. But then, as I said, as I started doing things and started surprising the hell out of myself, and I enlisted with my best friend. We're still best friends today. He's a surgeon here in California. He was like shocked because he was a jock and a football player. His dad was a Marine, and I just tagged along with him. And he was like shocked that I was still alive every day. So it's that sort of thing that started giving me confidence to do other things. So that was really the seed of anything that I've been able to push myself through to do was all planted in the Marine Corps.
So let me.
You actually already answered the next question I was going to ask, because I mean, so many writers or writers and just other creatives in general, they get so daunted by once they actually go out and start trying to do the thing, and that I feel like I've recently come around to the idea that like that's how you can tell the difference between a dilettante and like a true like hardcore creative is. Dilettantes, once it gets hard, will show themselves the door. Right. The true creatives will find a way to push through. And is that were you just kind of using that stuff, all that kind of, I guess, building that mental toughness all those years in the Marines? Like once you kind of get out into the writing world, like are you just kind of, okay, this script didn't make it, but I'll just go back and write the next one. And you just kind of use that same mentality to just kind of keep pushing through and rise up in your career.
No matter how tired you are in a forced march with a 70-pound pack on your back, you can always take one more step. There's never going to be a time when you can't take one more step. So those kind of lessons stay with me, and they're really present and really green and really fresh. I keep the drill instructors. When I wrote my book, I would keep those drill instructors screaming at me in my head. And it was a difficult process because I also, like I was saying at the beginning, I didn't know what I was doing. When I said I was going to write a book, I didn't take a class. I just started writing a book. I did warm up my muscles. I started a blog. I was so intimidated about writing long form narrative when I already figured I had cheated death, having some success as a television writer. I thought, they're going to find out. I have no reason to be here and they're going to kick me out. So when I started writing the book, I actually, again, my boyfriend at the time, we're still together, but back then he was so encouraging. He actually said, what's keeping you from writing the book? And I said, I just don't know that I can do it. I don't know if I can physically write that and it'd be any good. And so he said, look at it as your Thanksgiving plate. You take everything from the buffet and your plate is huge and you look at it and you think, well, I can't eat all that. And then you start taking little bites and you take a bite of potatoes, a bite of stuffing. And pretty soon you've handled everything. And that's because you look at it, and I look at writing my book as taking little bites, So I started a blog, and the blog turned out to be popular. It led me to contributing to Huffington Post. It led me to hosting a show on Food Network. And everything that I have gets back to your question, which is not possible without the things that were instilled in me in the Marine Corps. Not just the discipline, but the confidence that I earned there is a permanent transformation.
So I have so many questions, but let me start with this. How did that lead to you hosting a show on the Food Network?
A lot of my stories, I didn't know what to write about for a blog. And my boyfriend took my phone and he held it up and he goes, "You got like 80 pictures of pie in here. Write about that." So I cook every day and I cook a lot. So I started writing about some of my misadventures in the kitchen, whether it was a souffle dropping or whatever it was. And then I would pepper in the Marine Corps stories would sneak in because there's some juicy, good, hilarious stories. And I owned a monkey. I had a pet monkey. Those stories worked in there. So it was funny and real and honest and just kind of wacky. And Food Network reached out. I was in the middle of writing my book, and they sent me an email saying, "Would you like to, come to New York and talk about your blog as a TV show?" And I said, "Yeah." So I did that, and I filmed a pilot for them. And the pilot wasn't one that they could produce. However, they put me on other shows just to host, and then I was really focused on the book. So that it was just I just got the right eyes on it. And then Huffington Post reached out and had me contribute. And what I was doing, without knowing that I was doing it right away, was building my my author platform, because you have to have a social media presence, you have to have you have other things. So I was building my author platform at the same time.
Yeah. And then my other question, which I've now remembered, is, you know, when I was younger, and what you're talking about kind of goes with your whole journey. I did great through school. Like, people were giving me the parameters and I went, "Okay, give me extra credit now." Like, I would at least meet them, and then I'd be like, "Ooh, I can do more? Great. I'll do more." And I feel like when you're talking about the military, that's kind of what they're doing for you, is they're giving you the parameters you have to meet. And so you are set up to succeed in a way. You have people pushing you, and you know what the parameters are. And then when you're out in the real world, that's when I struggled, because I didn't have a day job, so nobody was telling me you need to be here. It was all up to me. And I think that's where a lot of artists end up struggling, especially with the business side of things. They're like, "Oh, well, I know how to create my work." Um, but I think even artists sometimes struggle with that because they don't have a schedule. They don't have that. They don't have the discipline that you learned in the military. When you got out of the military, did you ever struggle with the discipline, or was it just always ingrained in you? Did you just automatically have that?
I'm glad you asked that, because I did want to clarify something about that. I have the discipline, but I still am intimidated by things. I can let the mind is a powerful tool, and that anxiety about not doing something, or not finding success, or getting eyes on a project can totally I can talk myself out of writing very easily.
Mm.
Easily. You can talk yourself out of reaching out to somebody, or because you're thinking, I don't think I'm going to get answered. The discipline is what I use to fight through that. So I have wasted a ton of time. I always think that, letting the shoulda, woulda, couldas haunt me. But luckily, that discipline that's instilled in me, I know what it feels like. I know what it feels like to activate it. I literally know what it feels like to gird myself and push forward, because I've had to do it so often. And I use that every day to keep going in show business. Show business, look, let's be honest, it's an awful business. You're constantly unemployed. Every project ends. You're always looking for the next thing. You network nonstop. You're exhausted from networking. You just want to write. You just want someone to love your babies. And it's difficult. I have so many talented friends whose work, should be seen, and it may not be seen. But we're all trying hard, and it's hard to live in Los Angeles. It's expensive. It's stupid. It's crowded. But if you need to be here for the business, you need to be here. And it's you found a career in the restaurant world. If you have something like that, that's good. There's a lot of really talented real estate agents here, dry cleaners here, restaurant workers here that hung on as long as they could to a show business dream, and then hopefully found something else that used their talent and energy. It's awful that everybody's stories and talent doesn't find light. And sometimes, as we all know, it happens to people that we don't think deserve it. you know? Brandon, you brought up Graham. Graham worked, look what he did. He sacrificed going out with us because he had discipline to go home and write speed. And yes, it paid off. It might not have, but Graham's actually a brilliant writer. And I have no fault in Graham Yost. And but it does take that. So I still have to ramp up. I still have to get myself going. And it's just that I know how to do it. I know what it physically feels like. I wish everybody did. I wish everybody went to the Marine Corps and then tackled their life after that.
I love that sentiment. When I was younger, I hated.
But it's not a cult.
Yeah, right. I hated the idea of discipline when I was younger. I really I didn't want to go into a full-time day job. I just was like, I don't want someone telling me what to do. And then I was like, I just want to be an actor. But then you learn, you have to create that discipline somehow. Even if you don't have a routine, you still have to have discipline, or you won't get anything done. And all of the good things you get are by creating some sort of structure for yourself, right?
Well, I had a similar experience, because I remember when I was in college, I was at one point, I was very close to just going and joining the Army and got talked out of it, right before I was going to go do it. And then I realized years later, I went and, started doing martial arts, but I realized that structure, I was like, oh, this is, I mean, great. I know it's like a far cry from the military because you just kind of go to class and then you go home and go about your day. But instead of just living it, but even just kind of getting a glimpse of that, it's oh man, I really should have probably done that, because just learning this, okay, here's the task, go do the task, whatever you got to do to make it happen, just figure it out. And
as long as you can objectively see that, Brandon, at least you recognize that and saw that, because it's not just because I'm getting older. I've stressed about this 30 years ago, that your time is what's important. And I think we all have to make ourselves a priority, and that, yes, we have to get a job. Yes, we might have a family, and those are all super, super high priorities. But you need to, if you have something that you're not doing, that you want to do, you've got to make it work in your life. And the easiest way to do that is make yourself and your project a priority. So in order to write my book, I was working full time at the time. I stopped watching the Today Show. I used to, get ready in the morning and watch the Today Show, have breakfast, just hang around. Then I'd go to work at 10 o'clock. And then I thought, wait a second, if I'm up at 6:30 anyway, I can use that time to write. And that was just about making my time a priority. And that was my honored time for the first 6 months I worked on the book, was just 7 to 10 in the morning.
It sounds like what you're saying is you might have to give up something, but you're doing it for yourself. You're still gaining something from it, right?
Every story, the first thing we find out, and as actors, you have to find this out too, in every scene you audition with or every scene you perform, is what do you want? What does your character want? The only thing you have to identify in your audition scene or in the scene that you're shooting as a performer or a writer is, what does my character want? And then you operate the scene from that way. So if you want a divorce when you walk in that scene, that's the energy and that's what you want. If you want that chicken sandwich, you're the other character in that scene, you do that. So as the writer, it's our responsibility to identify what a character wants. So you have to be a character in your own movie. And you have to know what you want. Do you want to be successful as an actor? Then what do you have to do? Is it going to be, working a job from 3 to 11 so that you can be free to take a class in the day? Is it trying to find a way to audition for a play you don't want to audition in, but you like the director and you like the theater and you think, oh, maybe an agent will come see me. Whatever that is, there's a reason that you guys chose to do the business that you're in, and it's up to you. It's completely self-motivating to take the steps in order to try to make yourself successful in that business.
I am curious to kind of bring it all full circle, because now you're actually in the process of adapting your novel or your memoir into a show. So you went from the Marines into being a screenwriter, then wrote a novel about being in the Marines, and now you're kind of bringing it all together and making the show. And I know you're still in the middle of it, but take us through, like, what is this feels like a very kind of like full circle moment. Like, how has this process been? I know you're still in it, but like, how is it going so far?
Well, it's great because there's a lot of other people involved now. You know, at first it was just me, like I said, with my boyfriend harping at me like, "Are you going to write that book?" To me in my office, hammering out those pages, ignoring emails from Food Network. It was just me. And again, you're like I said up top, you're constantly worried. How's your work going to be perceived? You're asking for your, especially when it's a memoir, you're asking for your life to be judged. Is this worthy? Is this entertaining? Now, I'm actually glad that I took my time to write my book, because I needed the skills that I learned as a comedy writer to make that's the tone I wanted to write the book with. The book's really funny. Yeah, it's heartwarming, and it's crazy to watch me go from this little underweight gay kid to an actual U.S. Marine. It is an interesting story, but it was just me telling it. The difference now is there's a showrunner, there's other producers, there's a network, there's 100 people at Sony, there's 5,000 people at Netflix, there's 87 casting directors and agents, there's actors now. It's taken on a life of its own, and so I actually am participating in the new version. I look at it as two separate things. The book is the book, the show is the show. And the book's all mine, the show's a whole bunch of people. I don't know if that helps. What I'm saying is what makes it different is I have so many other voices and so much help. You know, one thing that I had to do, did you read the Publishers Weekly article that I wrote last week? That's where that quote came from.
Okay.
Okay.
Publishers Weekly asked me to write an article for them on the process of writing the book and then developing it for television. It's I can email you the link to that piece, and it's interesting because, you know, everything can go away in any job, whether you're at a bank or a 7-Eleven or whatever. Every job can go away. It's just I want this story to go because I've fallen in love with my story even more now that we've fully fleshed out all these other characters, 3 characters that aren't even in the book that we created. That's fun. And the others that are based on or inspired by characters in the book or amalgamations. You know, there's different lives because we take on, there's, you know, 8 writers in a room. You're all pitching in stories and things that you'd like to see and ideas you think. And so it takes on a life of its own. So I love the collaboration. Writing a book was a lonely business. I'd never, you know, written like that before. I'd written my spec scripts on my own, but suddenly to be in a room locked, totally responsible for, you know, however many pages it is, hundreds of pages long, is very different.
You sound like me. Like the thing I miss most, because now I'm mostly in my booth doing voiceover by myself. The thing I miss most is the collaboration with people. And, you know, yeah, it's just it's a different energy. But also what you said about the thinking of those as 2 different things is so interesting to me, because somebody I just spoke with recently was like, I have this idea for this show, but I want to do it on my terms and I don't want to compromise it and have them make it what it isn't. And the danger with that is that it might never get produced. And so were you ever worried about that?
It'll never get produced unless it's something brilliant which, you know, happened, like Fleabag. You know, Fleabag, she got no notes because she had worked on it for 4 years, workshopping it all over, and she's brilliant. The show was brilliant, but that's Steve Martin said it best. He said, the studio didn't change one word of my script. The one word they didn't change is on page 72. So it is collaborative. Yes, I love what your friend says, and that's how they should go. They should go in, this is it. This is how I want to tell the story. And I really hope that it is a no-note situation, but they also have to be willing to, if they really do want it made, they might have to compromise a bit. They may have to listen to what the market is wanting at the time. You know, clearly, we're all writing for Mr. Al Go rhythm, and it's, you know, if Al doesn't approve of what their show is like, then maybe there has to be a tweak or an adjustment. There's different market trends. You know, did you watch the show Reboot on Hulu?
No, I haven't seen that one.
it was just very funny because they had old writers in the writer's room and young writers. And it was just a hilarious way to look at what, we used to talk and use a lot of language that isn't used and isn't okay to use anymore in society and writers' rooms, and people get canceled and all that. And it's something that just changes. So if our society is changing, the medium that is both portraying and skewing that society has to change along with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true.
Well, yeah, thanks. Well, again, thanks for coming out, man, and sharing this story with us. So where can people find you online if they want to at you or hit you up?
My boyfriend made me the fanciest website, pinkmarine.com. It is so cute. He is the coolest guy in the world. And I am on social media, Eat Greg Eat. I probably use Instagram more for fun stuff, and Twitter, I'm just angry like everybody else. But it's my website is pretty organized, and then I've already finished my book tour, but I will post things when we find out if when we're going back into production and things like. We're still on a production pause since the strike.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Thank you so much. And we'll leave it there. We'll see you on TV, I guess.
See you on TV. Thank you for the conversation. I'm out here cheering for y'all with your voiceover work and your podcast. You're doing the thing. The thing that you're doing is you're making your dreams come true. You're going to have to work on a lot of other projects where you help make other people's dreams come true, but at least you're taking a step to making your own personal dream come true, and I'm here for that.
That will be all for this episode. To keep up with the show, follow us on social media at Scratch Claw Push. If social media isn't your thing, you can contact us at scratchclawpush@gmail.com. To learn more about the show, visit scratchclawpush.com. This podcast has been a Carcutta Media production. This recording, or any portion thereof, may not be reproduced or used in any manner whatsoever without the express written permission of the publisher, except for the use of brief quotations in a review. Copyright 2024 by Carcutta Media LLC, all rights reserved.